The action movie is one of the most expansive and highest grossing genres of film ever since it was first popularized. It's tough to say when action films really came into their own, but over the years it has evolved and taken on many forms. So what is good action? There are many ways to do it right, and far more ways to do it wrong.
Shoot! Shoot him! Hold on! You got him!
It's hard to pin down what exactly makes an action film good, but there are a few obvious and not so obvious answers that can help us make things a little clearer. So, let's just jump into it. Probably one of the most important elements to an action film is, of course, having good action. There's plenty of spectacle action out there that is impressive to watch, but for the most part it mainly comes down to big lights and explosions causing things to fall down. Instead, let's take a look at the most simple and versatile forms of action. Martial arts. And more specifically, two martial arts films that are vastly different, but still nail having the feeling of getting you on the edge of your seat and impress you with the lead actor's athletics. Now, the art of hand-to-hand combat has been thoroughly explored in film before, and it takes quite a bit to keep the stunts performed fresh. But here are two examples of an American martial arts movie and an Asian martial arts movie that do this very well. In the film Enter the Dragon, the fighting is more flashy, the camera work more wide, and the cuts less frequent. This is to show off the abilities of Bruce Lee, and for the audience to take stock of his surroundings. Letting people see the setting of the fight, we can try to guess how it will be used in combat, what props might be utilized as weapons, or where a body might land for a satisfying conclusion. In John Wick, an American action movie, American action and cinematography is very present. But we'll get more into American cinematography later, though. All you need to know for now is that the camera is a lot closer to the action, and the fighting is more brutal and intense. And while far more guns are used, what fighting skill we do see, which Keanu Reeves took half a year of training to learn, by the way, is fast and deadly to better sell the dangerousness of our main character. Props are a little less used, and when they are, it is for a far more serious effect. People are thrown off ledges and land with a crack, as opposed to flailing around when they land. And knives are not really dodged by our main character so much as used by him. Regardless of the differences, the action is exciting, and it does this by keeping things suspenseful by putting our main protagonist against multiple enemies. Said suspense is heightened by the fact that they can also get hurt. Many good action films show that regardless of how proficient our protagonist is at fighting, they can be harmed, and by extension, killed, meaning that both Bruce Lee and Keanu have to show athletic and mental strength and capabilities while in the midst of combat. Now, let's focus on the way you actually see the action. The camera is the eye through which the audience sees everything the director wants them to in a film. Putting things in frame or leaving things out can widely vary the audience's perceptions of what's going on. There are two big forms of camera movement and direction in action films. There is Steadicam at one end of the spectrum, and then there is shaky cam, which is on the other. Steadicam was the original form of action. It shows the entire scene and all of the action going down. But then came the Bourne trilogy in the early 2000s. While the first movie started the trend of shaky cam, the two sequels from director Paul Greengrass perfected it. And good shaky cam, to put it plainly, puts the audience directly in the moment with the main character, letting you feel the fast pace and the hecticness of the fight, by letting you see less than Steadicam would. Now, two films that show these techniques done right are The Raid and Mad Max Fury Road. Fury Road's action is built up of plenty of Steadicam. However, fights and chases never become boring because of two reasons. A, the action is interesting. What with a flaming guitar and exploding harpoons, and B, because the most important part of the action is in the center frame, something that can't be captured as well by shaky cam. Everything you need to see is placed right in front of you, so your eyes do not need to travel across the screen, and it creates a picture that is a little bit hypnotic and not dizzying as shaky cam can be. Since we already mentioned a film that brought shaky cam to its peak, I wanted to talk about The Raid, which manages to bring Steadicam and Shaky Cam and meet them perfectly in the middle. The Raid opts to let takes roll for a little while and slows the camera when it has to, but when the time for fighting goes down, you can see a very noticeable change in cuts and camera shake. These are nowhere near the level of the Bourne films' cuts and editing and camera work, but they still manage to feel unique. Finally, there's a story behind an action scene. In many of the previously mentioned films, story is not a huge priority in getting the approval of the audience. They're invigorating and get you to care about the main characters with very minimal backstory and dialogue. With John Wick's primary motivation is that his dog is dead, and Max's primary goal is just to survive. Hints of his backstory are just mere 5-second flashes that we get throughout the movie. But good action can bring a lot to a story. A good story can also bring a lot to the action. Now, let's look at Terminator 2 and the sequel to the first movie, The Raid 2. Now, the big part of having story coupled with action is the stakes. As previously mentioned, stakes make every fight more dangerous, more suspenseful, and in these films, the stakes are built around the fact that the main characters have something to lose, as opposed to their life. A good story can also make good characters we as an audience care about, and seeing them fail means we have something to lose. Now, The Raid 2 goes more in depth into the main character's family, his newborn child, and the friends he makes while infiltrating a Jakartan mob. Simple, but we get more invested into how exactly he's going to take down his enemies, as opposed to the first film, where it's pretty obvious that all the solutions to his problems are going to be him walking up to people and punching them into pulp. In Terminator 2, we learn the story of how the future turns out if our main protagonist cannot change the past. Well, should they fail, Earth becomes a wasteland with evil machines rising up and taking over the planet. Thus, in addition to liking the main characters because of their chemistry, we have something else to latch onto and get invested in. So, overall, good action films are primarily built around stakes, spectacle, and filmmaking. You can make a good action film with just 2 of these 3, but the best almost always use all 3 to the maximum effect. This has been my take on action.